They had been searching for traces of a lost mining convoy when the radar operator froze at his screen. Blip looked like a drifting asteroid, but the numbers made no sense. The object was huge, far larger than any known warship, and yet it moved with perfect control. The crew stared at the readings in disbelief. No empire, no federation, no alliance had ever built something of this scale. It was almost the size of a small moon, a metal giant wrapped in layers of unknown alloys. Captain Vreth ordered the ship to slow down, his voice steady, but his hands tight on the armrest. "Zoom in," he said, and the image on the main screen sharpened. The object was not a rock. It was a vessel. Its hull was dark, absorbing the faint starlight. But etched along one side were markings that made every alien in the control room lean forward. They were not in any known language of the galaxy, but the scouts had seen the script before in old reports and stories that veterans told in low voices. The letters were human. No one spoke for several seconds, as if the sound of their own voice might wake the thing. There were no lights in its windows, no visible engines firing, no weapons protruding from the hull. It floated in the black like the corpse of a forgotten titan. The navigator, trying to make his voice casual, said it might be abandoned, maybe even a derelict from an ancient war. But the science officer shook his head, his eyes locked on the power readings coming through. The ship was not dead. Beneath its silent armor, a heartbeat of energy pulsed like the breathing of some massive predator. The heat signature alone was enough to power a fleet. "It's awake," the officer whispered, "and it's looking at us." Vreth wanted to turn back, but the pull of curiosity was stronger than fear. This was a discovery that could change their careers, maybe even the balance of power in the galaxy. Slowly, cautiously, the Rafthal edged closer, sensors probing, scanners unfolding. Every ping they sent toward the vessel was swallowed by its hull, as if the ship refused to let itself be measured. When the first structural scans came back, the data nearly crashed their system. The walls were layered with materials no one in the Coalition had ever seen before. There were no weak points, no seams, no sign of damage from centuries in space. It was perfect, and that perfection was frightening. As the scout ship drew within visual range, alien crew felt the temperature in the bridge drop. None of them could explain why, but a pressure seemed to press down on their chests, as if they had entered the airless gaze of something vast and alive. Then came the moment that froze them in place. Across the ship's side, faint lines of light appeared, glowing for only a second before vanishing again. The patterns were deliberate, like an eye opening and closing. No one on the Rafthal spoke of it, but every one of them felt it. The human vessel had just acknowledged their presence. The helmsman asked in a trembling voice if they should send a greeting. The captain hesitated, then gave the order. A short, standard Coalition hail was transmitted, polite and formal, asking for identification. The message vanished into the void. No reply came. Minutes passed and the silence became heavier, almost physical. Then, without warning, their screen flickered on. No video, no face, only text, written in those same human letters the translator struggled to decode. After several seconds, the words appeared in their language. The message was short. "You are too close." Every member of the crew felt the warning like ice down their spine. This was not the voice of a drifting relic. This was a living ship, controlled by someone who had chosen to remain unseen. Captain Vreth ordered a slow retreat, but curiosity kept their sensors locked on the massive vessel. Noticed movement, not from the Supercarrier itself, but from the shadows behind it. Shapes began to emerge, faint, blurry outlines that their instruments struggled to focus on. One, then two, then more. At first they thought these were asteroids, but the patterns of motion were too deliberate. These were ships, dozens of them, all positioned as if they had been there the entire time, hidden in the carrier's shadow. The realization spread through the bridge like a chill. The human vessel was not alone. It was the heart of something much larger. A fleet that could cloak itself so perfectly that even Coalition military satellites would miss it, and they had just stumbled right into the middle of it. Before anyone could react, the carrier shifted slightly, its sheer mass making the stars behind it seem to bend. No weapons fired. No threats were spoken. But the unspoken message was clear. The humans had allowed them to see only because they wanted them to. Captain Vreth felt the weight of 1,000 unasked questions pressing on him. How long had this ship been here? Why was it so far from human space? Was it guarding something or waiting for something to happen? The com screen blinked once more, another message arriving without any signal trace they could follow. It contained only 3 words. We are watching. The Coalition Council chamber was never silent, but that day it felt like the air had been stolen from the room. The Rathalas captain stood in the center, his recorded images of the human vessel flickering in the air above him. The alien. Leaders stared at the projection as though it might leap from the light and crush them. The scale of the ship was impossible to deny. No civilization in living memory had constructed anything of that size, not even the legendary builders of the First Age. Yet here it was, a human supercarrier, drifting on the edge of Coalition territory, pulsing with enough power to rival a star. Some around the table suggested it was an abandoned project, a relic of a human past, long forgotten. Others knew better. The transmission, those 3 words, "we are watching," carried no hint of accident. It was a deliberate statement, and that meant the ship was not only active, but aware. The military faction and the council demanded immediate action. The Coalition Navy, they argued, could surround the vessel and force it to yield. The science faction scoffed at the idea, pointing out the disappearance of the Raphthal S sensor drones and the energy readings that no known weapon could match. A third faction, the cautious ones, warned that provoking humans without understanding their capabilities could trigger a war no one could win. Stories about humans were old, scattered, and often dismissed as exaggerations. But every one of those stories spoke of unpredictability and survival against impossible odds. The council could not decide. They argued for hours, voices rising, hands slamming the table, until finally a choice was made. They would send a single reconnaissance squadron to establish contact. No weapons fired, no threats made, just an attempt to measure the human ship more closely. The squadron left within the day, 6 fast interceptors and a command frigate. The pilots were hand-picked, all veterans, their orders simple: approach, scan, and report. As they neared the coordinates, the supercarrier remained still, a silent shadow against the stars. The squadron slowed, splitting into a loose formation. Scanners hummed, beams of data pulsing toward the human hull. The results came back, scrambled, fragmented, as though the ship's skin absorbed and reflected the signals in ways no one could explain. It was like trying to measure the depth of an ocean by throwing a single pebble. One of the interceptors, perhaps out of impatience or perhaps out of arrogance, decided to push closer. The pilot's voice came over the channel, light with forced humor, saying he would get a real close-up for the record. His ship drifted within 1,000 meters of the supercarrier's surface. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then his signal vanished. No explosion, no distress call. Just silence. His interceptor was simply gone, replaced by empty space. Panic rippled through the formation. The command frigate ordered all ships to pull back, but before they could regroup, the squadron's comms lit up. The voice that spoke was deep and calm, neither human nor machine, but something in between. "Leave," it said. Just that one word. Then the line went dead. The frigate's captain, his hands shaking on the controls, did not hesitate. The squadron turned and retreated at full burn. Engines screaming against the pull of the unknown. Back in the council chamber, the report only deepened the fear. Whatever technology the humans had built into that vessel, it could erase a ship without firing a shot. And the most troubling part was the restraint. The supercarrier had let 5 of the 6 ships leave. It had chosen not to destroy them. Choice meant it was not acting out of accident or instability. It was in control. And that made it infinitely more dangerous. Yet not all in the council were afraid. Some were intrigued. A warship that large could be a prize beyond measure, a weapon that could cement dominance for centuries. Whispers began to spread among the more ambitious leaders about ways to capture it, to take it before the humans, could bring it fully into play. Plans were drawn in secret, fleets reassigned without explanation. All the while, in the black silence of deep space, the human supercarrier remained exactly where it had been, unmoving, unchanging. But if any of those leaders had been on the Raphthul, they would have known the truth. The ship was not still, it was waiting. The plan to surround the human vessel began in whispers, but soon spread through the coalition like fire on dry leaves. Entire fleets shifted position under the cover of routine patrols. Officially, it was a training exercise, but every captain knew the truth. This was a show of force meant to corner the human ship. The operation was simple on paper. Approach from all sides, block its escape routes, then send boarding parties if it refused to respond. The strategists believed the vessel's sheer size would make it slow and vulnerable once boxed in, but none of them had ever fought humans before. The fleets closed in over 3 days, their massive formations gliding into position like blades being drawn. The human supercarrier didn't move. No defensive fire, no evasive maneuvers, not even a change in its energy output. To the commanders, it looked like arrogance. To the younger pilots, it felt like something worse: confidence. Still, the orders were clear. At the exact same moment, all fleets would advance. Engines lit the void, hundreds of warships pushing forward in unison, their weapons primed but not yet fired. The first wave of scans went out, final attempt to measure the carrier before direct engagement. That was when the readings began to glitch. Ships reported flickering sensor returns, strange shapes that appeared and vanished in the shadows behind the human vessel. At first, they dismissed it as interference from the carrier's hull, but the shapes grew sharper, more defined. Hull signatures. Dozens of them, then hundreds. All of them moving with impossible precision. Their outlines sliding in and out of the visible spectrum, like ghosts slipping through a half-closed door. The coalition commanders froze. None of these ships had been detected before. They had no heat signatures, no drive trails, no detectable comms chatter. And yet they were there, positioned in perfect formation around the supercarrier, as though they had been part of it all. Along the coalition's largest warships were suddenly flanked on every side, their tactical displays filling with red warnings. For every coalition ship in the trap, there were now 3 human vessels. Each one sleek, dark, and bristling with weapon ports that hummed faintly in the silence, before the coalition could even consider retreat. A voice cut across every channel at once. It was human.com and impossibly close, as though the speaker was standing right behind each listener. "You should not be here," the voice said. The words were not shouted, but they carried a weight that made even the most hardened captain's spines lock straight. The coalition admiral in charge gave the only order he could think of: fire. Beams, missiles, and plasma tore through the void, converging on the carrier's central hull. And then, nothing happened. The weapons struck, but instead of exploding, the energy and shrapnel simply vanished on contact, absorbed by the hull, as though it were swallowing light itself. The fleet commanders stared at their displays in disbelief. No damage, no shield flicker, not even a scorch mark. Then the ghost fleet moved. It was not a charge or a counterattack. It was something far worse. The human ships slid silently through the coalition's formations, weaving between their vessels without firing a single shot. But every ship they passed went dark, its engines dying, its lights flickering out like a candle in the wind. No explosions, no debris, just dead metal drifting in space. The coalition realized too late that they were not in a battle. We're in a demonstration. Within minutes, half the fleet was disabled. The rest began a desperate retreat, breaking formation, scattering into deep space. The ghost fleet did not pursue. Instead, it drew back into the shadows, merging once more with the supercarrier's outline until it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. The massive human vessel remained in its place, silent and unmoving. But every captain who escaped carried the same thought back to the council. The humans had let them live. The question now was why. The coalition had no time to recover before the human vessel changed everything. For days after the failed encirclement, it remained still, an unmoving shadow on the edge of their charts. Then, without warning, the supercarrier stirred. It was only a faint shift in its orientation, a slow turn, as if it were considering its next move. Its bow aligned perfectly with the coordinates of the Coalition's home systems. Every military station in the sector went on high alert. Civilian evacuation orders were whispered at first, then shouted across public channels. The Coalition had believed the ship was guarding something out in the empty reaches. Now they feared it was coming for them. The first clear image of its engines came from a long-range probe. They were unlike anything in Coalition records, not even resembling the ancient drives found on first-age relics. The propulsion fields bent light, warping the space behind the ship like heat waves rising from stone. As the carrier advanced, its ghost fleet materialized around it, no longer bothering to hide. The smaller human vessels moved with terrifying precision, forming an escort wall that no known tactic could break. It was a formation built not to defend the carrier, but to ensure it reached its target. Without delay, panic began to ripple through the Coalition Council. Emergency meetings ran for hours, but the truth kept breaking through every argument. They could not stop it. They could not even slow it down. The weapon that had swallowed their attacks would swallow them again. But what truly unnerved the leaders was the intelligence report brought in by a covert agent. Someone who had infiltrated a human trade station years before. According to the agent, the Supercarrier was not a battleship at all. It was a city. Millions of humans lived aboard, spread across entire districts, from agricultural zones to towering residential blocks. It was a moving nation, a place designed to outlast planets. And if it had a military purpose, it would be far greater than anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Coalition scrambled to send diplomatic envoys, each one transmitting pleas for communication into the void. Most received no reply. The few that did reported a simple, chilling truth. The humans were aware of the Coalition's fear, and they were in no rush to ease it. On the carrier itself, life continued as if nothing had changed. Markets bustled. Children played in artificial parks under vast ceilings that mimicked an endless sky. Somewhere deep within, military crews maintained systems no outsider had ever seen. The people of the ship lived in a harmony that made it easy to forget the vessel's scale until one looked out from the observation decks and saw a fleet large enough to blanket a continent. When the carrier crossed into Coalition-controlled space, there was no attack, no bombardment. It simply slowed, its engines dimming as it drifted past outer colonies, but its sheer presence had the effect of a weapon. Entire stations shut down, their crews fleeing without orders. Planetary militias surrendered without a single shot fired. The Coalition Navy didn't engage, only shadowed it at a distance, afraid to provoke another demonstration like the one that had erased half their fleet. And still, the human ship moved closer to the heart of Coalition territory, its course straight and deliberate, as if it had chosen its destination long ago, in the war room. Some council members argued that the humans were bluffing, that no species, however powerful, would risk open war without reason. Others saw something more dangerous, a calculated patience, the kind that belonged to predators who didn't need to rush because they already controlled the hunt. Still no one could answer the question that now kept them awake through sleepless nights. What would happen when the human supercarrier finally arrived? The Coalition's last hope for understanding the human vessel came from stolen intelligence. In the shadows of a border station, a small courier ship slipped in under a false registry and delivered a data core to the Council's security division. The files inside were fragmented, corrupted in places, but what remained was enough to shatter every assumption the Coalition had made. The supercarrier had not been built for war, at least not originally. It was an ark, a self-sustaining world ship designed to preserve humanity if their homeworld and colonies ever fell. It could travel for centuries without resupply, carrying entire generations within its walls. Vast agricultural decks produced food for millions. Recycling plants ensured nothing was wasted. Artificial suns lit massive gardens and forests that, stretched for kilometers, was a city adrift in the void, a safe haven that could outlast the collapse of civilizations. But somewhere along the centuries, the ark had changed. The humans had modified it, deck by deck, system by system, until its defenses rivaled the most advanced warships in existence. They had layered its hull with exotic matter shields capable of swallowing any energy thrown at them. They had hidden fleets in its shadow, ships designed for stealth so perfect they could vanish in open space. And deep in its core, sealed behind layers of security no outsider had breached, there was something else. The stolen files did not name it directly, but every fragment hinted at the same thing: a weapon so powerful even the humans placed restrictions on its use. The council stared at the projections in silence. Some whispered that the weapon could crack planets or destabilize stars. Others thought it might be worse, something that could wipe entire systems from existence without leaving debris. The fact that no one knew for certain made it more frightening than any confirmed threat. And yet, the humans had never used it, not even when surrounded by hostile fleets. That restraint was the most unnerving part. It meant the humans did not see the coalition as worth using it on. Not yet. While the council argued over what to do, reports continued to pour in from the outer colonies. Wherever the carrier passed, it did not fire, did not conquer, but it left an unshakable mark. Entire mining worlds stopped sending resources to the coalition and began shipping goods toward human space instead, without explanation. Merchants rerouted their trade networks to follow the carrier's path, drawn by its markets and the safety its presence seemed to guarantee. In less than a month, the humans had shifted the balance of economic power in the region without firing a single shot. A small group of coalition leaders began to see the larger pattern. This was not an invasion in the traditional sense. The humans were not trying to destroy the coalition, they were absorbing it, turning worlds and fleets without force. Winning loyalty was something far more dangerous than weapons. They were offering safety, stability, a place aboard the Ark for those willing to serve under its banner. And for those who refused, the Ghost Fleet would always be there, silent and watching. The most chilling revelation came in the final data. Fragment. It was a single line from a human transmission dated centuries ago, long before the coalition had even formed. The line read, "We will survive the galaxy." The question is, will you? The coalition realized, far too late, that they had never been the target of the carrier's full strength. Everything they had seen, the vanishing ships, the effortless absorption of their attacks, the silent shadow fleets, was only a fraction of what it could do. The humans were not showing their hand. They were letting the galaxy know, piece by piece, that when the true test came, they would be ready. That readiness was the real weapon. The coalition's desperation reached its peak when the human supercarrier entered the final approach toward their core worlds. Every remaining warship they had gathered took position along the defense perimeter, but no one truly believed they could stop it. The sight of the carrier filling the tactical screens was enough to make seasoned admirals grip the edges of their seats. It was so vast that its shadow swallowed the light of the nearby star, casting the defending fleets in darkness. The Ghost Fleet drifted around it in perfect silence, forming an ever-shifting wall of black steel and hidden weapons. The humans didn't need to fire a shot to make their presence feel like the weight of a collapsing star. Inside the coalition council chamber, the atmosphere was one of quiet defeat. Arguments had burned themselves out. There were no more strategies to debate, no tricks left to play. The only choice was to try diplomacy before their entire civilization collapsed. Final envoy was chosen, a veteran diplomat who had once negotiated peace in the middle of a three-way war. His shuttle departed under heavy escort, weaving carefully between the ghost ships until it reached the carrier's colossal hangar. The hangar itself was like nothing the envoy had ever seen. Could have swallowed entire cities, its walls. Lined with human craft of every size, fighters, shuttles, gunships, all in perfect condition. All powered down but ready to launch at a moment's notice. Armed escorts led him through towering corridors lit by soft artificial sunlight. The scale was dizzying, the air clean but heavy with the hum of machinery deep beneath the deck. It was not the smell of war, it was the smell of industry, of a self-contained world that needed nothing from the outside. At last, he was brought before the human commander. The man was not dressed in armor, nor was he flanked by guards. He wore simple black, his posture relaxed, but there was no mistaking the authority in his eyes. The envoy delivered the coalition's plea: peace, trade, the promise of non-aggression. The commander listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When the envoy finished, the human leaned forward slightly, his voice calm but sharp enough to cut through the air. "Peace is possible," he said, "but you've already shown us how you think. Remember every action you took, every attempt to surround us, every shot you fired. And now, we have shown you what we are." The envoy asked the question the council had feared to voice: why the humans had not destroyed them when they had the chance. The commander's answer was a quiet dagger: "'Cause destruction is easy. What comes after is what matters." The coalition fleets watched from a distance as the carrier slowly turned away from their worlds. Its engines flared, bending the starlight, and in moments it was moving back into the deep black. The ghost fleet followed, vanishing one by one, until the void was empty again. No demands were left behind, no terms dictated, only silence. But that silence carried a weight heavier than any bombardment. The coalition knew the humans could return at any time, and if they did, it would not be for a warning. Every admiral, every captain, every citizen who had seen the Supercarrier understood the truth. The humans had spared them not out of weakness, but out of choice. And that choice was both a mercy and a warning. Far from coalition space, in the heart of the Supercarrier, life continued as if nothing had happened. Children laughed in the parks, markets thrived, and deep in the core, the weapon no outsider had ever seen remained dormant. But in the mind of every human aboard, there was no doubt the galaxy now understood. Humanity would survive anything. The only question was who else would survive with them.